Okay, colleagues, good morning and welcome to today's meeting for the Committee of the Economy. I'm joined in the room by Declan Kearney, the Vice Chair, Diane Forsyth, online by Sinead McLaughlin, Padraig Delargy and David Honeyford. Members of the committee will be broadcast throughout Parliament buildings. Start with apologies from Diana Armstrong and Jonathan Buckley. Happy to take any others at this stage.
Revised agenda.
Yeah, no problem. Are members content then with the revised agenda we discussed in closed session at the start? Members are content that we adopt that? Yeah. Okay. Declarations of interest, members, any? No, none. Item 3, chairperson's business. Members, there's just a note that's been circulated in relation to our visit to Seagate last week. Members content to note and send a letter to Seagate thanking them for the event. Members content?
Right.
Okay. Item 4 is draft minutes. Members content they are true and accurate reflection. Agreed? Yeah. Okay. Item 5, any matters arising? None. If not, then let's move straight to item 6, which is the utility regulator oral and written evidence. The committee will now receive evidence from the UR in respect of its forward work programme and the recent consultation on guaranteed service standards. Remember, there's a number of papers within your pack, and I, on behalf of the committee, can I welcome our colleagues from the utility regulator. You're all very welcome. Colleagues, there's been a couple of changes to the committee since your last appearance. So maybe in your remarks you could just outline the ongoing work of the utility regulator and some of the work that we've been doing with you as committee, so you can talk about your forward work plan, your recent consultation on guaranteed services. Perhaps you might want to touch on the utility regulator decarbonisation bill and also energy security. So at that, I'm happy to hand over to you if you are content.
Okay. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, committee members, for the opportunity to brief you today on our forward work programme for the year ahead and to update you on our guaranteed standards of service. Just want to introduce the team here. So Peter Russell, Executive Director, Price Controls, Networks and Energy Futures at the Regulator. Colin Broomfield, Director of Markets, both retail and wholesale. Barbara Cantley is Director of Consumer Protection and Enforcement. And then finally, Brian Mulhern is Director of Networks and Energy Futures. So just before, Chair, turning to the forward work programme, and then Barbara's going to give an overview of the guaranteed standards of service, just want to acknowledge the wider global context that we're finding ourselves in, which continues to affect households and businesses in Northern Ireland. The ongoing conflict involving Iran has disrupted global oil and gas markets, as we know, and this puts pressure on families here, particularly as 61% of homes rely on heating oil. So we recognise the worry this creates for households already managing tight budgets, and we remain very aware of the impact of rising energy costs can have on well-being and financial security. It's important to note that the utility regulator has no statutory role in regulating home heating oil. We regulate gas and electricity. But gas and electricity prices, given that half our electricity is generated from gas, also remains influenced by global conditions. Since the Iranian conflict began, wholesale gas prices have fluctuated significantly. Historically, going back 20 years before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, gas prices were around 50 to 60 pence per therm, depending on whether it was a cold winter. But unfortunately, they triggered after the invasion to a spike of £6.40 in August 2022. Later, prices have eased back since then, and from April 2025, we've generally seen prices around 70 to 80 pence per therm. However, since the conflict began on the 28th of February, we have seen prices spike to around £1.70 per therm. But as early as today, prices have come down, and we're looking at prices this morning of around £1.26, £1.27 per therm. The market's slightly different in terms of gas to heating oil. Northern Ireland gas domestic suppliers hedge their purchases over an 18 to 24-month period, meaning domestic prices do not react immediately to short-term price volatility. This differs from home heating oil, where prices respond more quickly. Nevertheless, a prolonged conflict may lead to higher gas prices over the coming months, and we will continue to monitor developments closely. The utility regulator is responsible for scrutinising and approving the maximum tariffs for the largest domestic suppliers: Power NI for electricity, SSE Power and for Electricity, SSE Electricity Gas in Belfast and the West, and Firmus Energy in the 10 towns for gas. All other suppliers set their own tariffs independently, with the regulated tariff acting as a price to beat. Some electricity suppliers, as you know, whose price is unregulated, including the likes of Share Energy and Click Energy, have already increased their prices in response to market conditions. And as always, we encourage consumers to use the Consumer Council switching tool to ensure people are on the best available tariffs. So turning to our forward work programme, as an independent, non-ministerial department, our core duty is to protect the short and long-term interests of consumers. Each year we have a statutory duty to publish a forward work programme outlining the strategic projects we will deliver alongside our day-to-day regulatory responsibilities. Our draft forward work programme sets out our planned projects for 2026-2027, and these are aligned to our corporate strategy, which was entitled Protecting Consumers on the Way to Net Zero. These projects cover consumer protection, price controls, and preparing our energy and water systems for the future. The programme reflects extensive consultation, and we are very grateful for all those who have contributed. The committee might be interested in several particular areas. First, smart meters. We're working with the Department for the Economy to develop a programme plan for smart meter rollout. Our focus is to ensure that the decisions reflect the Department's design principles, and especially keeping consumers' interests at the centre. A joint smart meter delivery group supported by experts will oversee this work. Then we're going to look at tariff structures. So we're progressing a 4-year project to modernise electricity tariffs so they are cost reflective, support efficient use of energy, and enable a transition to net zero, and that ties in with the work on smart meters. This includes preparing for time of use tariffs, dynamic tariffs, and ensure there is the consumer protections in place for those new tariffs. We're also looking at interconnectors. This is the 3rd consecutive year of this project, and we're assessing the most suitable regulatory model for potential future interconnection. There's a potential interconnector further interconnector between Scotland and Northern Ireland, which could deliver low-cost energy, greater security of supply, and support decarbonisation. The real heavy lifting in the work is around price controls, and we're currently assessing Sony's price plan for the RP27 price control for Sony, which will run from 2027 to 2032, and intend to publish our draft determination on the 1st of September this year. In autumn 2026, we'll also publish key milestones for price controls around gas transmission, gas distribution, and gas supply price controls. We also plan to work with the department around offshore wind through the Offshore Renewable Energy Action Plan Steering Group, to ensure that a regulatory framework is in place that protects consumers, including the recovery of offshore transmission costs. We're also working, which are really around a customer care register. This is to create a single utility customer care register covering electricity, gas and water, and potentially this is the first of its kind globally. This will ensure that consumers in vulnerable circumstances will receive consistent, enhanced support across those essential services. While our forward work programme highlights major strategic projects, the majority of our work remains on the day-to-day regulation, scrutinising prices, monitoring markets, enforcing licence conditions, and protecting consumers. For our forward work programme consultation, we've received 20 responses, and our board will meet tomorrow to approve the final programme, which will then be published on our website and shared with the committee. Chair, that concludes my opening remarks, but I just wanted to hand over to Barbara Cantley to update you on where we are with guaranteed standards of service.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the Chair Committee members for inviting us along today and for your continued interest in our work on the guaranteed standards of service, in particular those standards around severe weather. So as you've seen in the briefing note, we have published a full consultation now on GSS, and we're now reviewing responses and finalising our decisions. One of the important issues to remember about GSS is that they are individual payments for consumers that recognise poor performance, when companies are reasonably expected to meet specific standards of service and have not met those standards. It is also important to remember that these individual payments are not about compensation for any loss incurred as a result of the failure to provide a standard of service. They are about acknowledging the inconvenience that the consumer has experienced. Although the GSS cover a wide range of services such as metering, complaints, appointments, notice of supply interruption, I understand that members have been particularly interested in the GSS for severe weather. As I'm sure you'll remember from Stormy Owen in January 2025, it gave us a Met Office red warning indicating a major incident and danger to life. The storm had a huge impact on the electricity network. It resulted in over 5,000 faults and a loss of power to over 320,000 homes and businesses here. That's around 30%. As you know, a working group was then established involving DFE, NIE Network and ourselves to consider if payments could be made to customers who had lost power due to severe weather, and one of the outworkings of the group was a commitment for the UR to revisit the possibility of providing severe weather GSS payments. We began by conducting stakeholder engagement and research last summer, and given the impact the storm had on Northern Ireland households and businesses, we considered it important to speak directly to consumers and their representatives about their experiences and what their priorities are around severe weather conditions and electricity supply. Our survey research with 1,000 domestic and 200 business consumers found that consumers' priority was getting their electricity back on, followed by having up-to-date information on when they could expect to be back on supply and getting information on what supports were available in their area while supply was off. Only 2% of household customers stated that getting a payment was most important, with no businesses saying this. When we spoke to consumer representative bodies, they indicated that payments were largely a secondary issue and the priority was getting supply back on and providing support to customers at the time of need, such as timely updates and restoration and help with essentials such as food, water and heat. Domestic and business stakeholders spoke positively about NIE Network's communications and activity during Stormy Owen. Their comments included how NIE Networks came across as very receptive and their staff were mobilised well. There was praise for information which they put on social media to let people know where the outages were. These stakeholders emphasised the need for leadership and coordination in supporting our most vulnerable consumers. They also talked about how making the network more resilient is the best way to prevent major outages and preventing this situation arising at all. In our pre-consultation engagement with some business representatives said a GSS payment would be good for small businesses. Most actually questioned the benefit of a severe weather GSS payment for non-domestics, as the potential value would be minimal given the cost of supply interruption to their businesses. To demonstrate this, one stakeholder provided an example of a site that would incur £30,000 of losses if it stopped working for 1 hour due to supply loss. Therefore, building resilience for the network and good communications was considered to be the key priority for business representatives that we consulted. These themes have also been reflected in the responses that we have received on the consultation paper. We got 12 responses to the consultation with really good representation from both industry and consumer representatives. Consumer bodies said they would like to see GSS payments for supply restoration in severe weather to the same value as in GB and not paid for by consumers. However, there was recognition that severe weather events are not directly comparable to the other forms of service under performance, and that it may not be reasonable to expect this particular GSS payment to be funded in exactly the same way as the others. Respondents also recognised the importance of a proportionate approach and the need to balance the inconvenience faced by consumers and the financial impact on distribution companies. All domestic consumer body respondents were very concerned about the impact of any measures that would result in an increase to electricity bills, particularly the impacts on low-income and vulnerable households. Key in the feedback was the preference for investment in network resilience and for practical support at the time of need, rather than modest payments from GSS post-event. This ties in with our stakeholder engagement, where representatives largely felt that payments were a secondary issue and that the consumers they represented were more concerned about receiving support at the time of need. They talked about how this would include updates on when supply was expected to be restored, access to essentials including food, water and heat, and information on how to manage without electricity. During these sessions, stakeholders also told us that they were concerned that lessons had not been learnt from COVID and that as a region we were not ready to react to a crisis. They talked about how community resilience groups already exist to respond to events like flooding and felt that such groups would be a valuable asset through which to coordinate and mobilise support for events such as electricity supply loss. A response from a non-domestic representative said that while they did want to see payments introduced for farmers, the overriding priority is a reliable and resilient electricity supply rather than post-event compensation. They emphasised that the greatest economic benefit to agriculture would come from improved network resilience and faster restoration rather than modest post-event payments. For more understanding of the research, the extensive supplier engagement and our consultation responses, we see that consumers, for now, are prioritising prevention over GSS payments. They want a reliable network that can withstand severe weather so that they do not lose supply in the first place. If there are storm outages, they want systems in place to help all consumers with a focus on the most vulnerable during this time. We will be finalising our analysis of the GSS consultation and bringing our decision paper to our board at the end of April. If our board approves our decision, we will then present the final proposals to DFE for their consent. If DFE consents to the proposed regulations, the Department have the responsibility then of laying them before the Northern Ireland Assembly. In terms of NIEN resilience, as I've said, our stakeholders have told us that their priority is a reliable network so that they do not lose supply in the first place. To make this happen, NIE Networks have committed to a strategic review of network resilience and the response to severe weather events. They have identified tree cutting works as a major priority to aid network resilience and have proposed an accelerated programme of works to meet this need. We will consult on licence modification to facilitate this investment before the summer, but in the meantime, NIE Networks has sufficient funding within its current allowances to begin an accelerated programme. We will also be working with NIE Networks and other network companies and suppliers on the Customer Care Register project, which John mentioned when he was referring to our Forward Work programme. This will create a single utility register across electricity, gas and water that will ensure those customers who need this extra help and information are known to NIE and prioritised for contact. Chair, that concludes both our opening remarks and we're very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed for that, much appreciated. If we could just start on the GSS then. So are you presenting a number of options to your board then that would then arrive at the Minister for decision?
In terms of just the severe weather payments, yes, well, we will go through the options that we had consulted on and we will...
Four options?
The 4 options consulted on will provide the evidence and then I'll be putting a recommendation to the board for them to endorse, and it's with that endorsement that I'll follow with the draft regulations. And
have you made a recommendation at this stage yet?
No, we'll be doing that next month.
Okay. So my slight concern with the issue in relation to GSS is the impact it will have on people's bills. I think there's a common misunderstanding that suppliers rather than customers would pay into GSS. Ultimately, people would have to pay into GSS and then claim it back if that severe weather was to take place. Maybe not so much on the domestic side, but have you done any calculations in terms of this was to include non-domestic, what the impact on a energy bill of a company would be if we were to introduce GSS?
So the modelling that we did as part of the consultation was we rolled it into both how much it would cost all customers if all customers received a payment, and that ranged from £0 to £25 for at least 1 year, and that was based on the Stormy Owen. So it was just part of that, amalgamating the two.
So in terms of the business, what would be the average addition to their bill on a yearly basis?
About £25.
£25 a year. So you think that it would be pretty similar between domestic and non-domestic?
No, it would be less on the domestic.
So a domestic would then be?
About 15 for Stormy Owen.
Okay. No problem. And have you done a calculation of what a likely claim would be in worst case scenario?
Yes, so basically for each of the 4 options that we put into our consultation paper, each claim would be capped depending on what the options are. So if the current exemptions are in place, there would be no payments. If we went with the older GB scheme, the cap was 700. If we went with the new GB scheme, the cap was 2,000. And then we put another option together, which was a payment of £10 per day, capped at 300.
Okay.
So it's really
reflected what Fibrous and Ofcom.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's what Fibrous and Ofcom did in the last storm they paid out. So we just thought we would show a variance.
Yeah. So ultimately, though, consumers would have to bear the cost of this.
Well, we did consult on 3 cost recovery options within our consultation paper, and that included NIEN paying for all of it, or the customers paying for all of it. And we also consulted on a hybrid, which is the current scheme in GB, where the DNOs pay up to a certain amount out of their profits, and then after that, customers pay.
But is there legislative provision in Northern Ireland to have either hybrid or put it on to supplier?
If the evidence suggests that this is the route to go, we would put that into the GSS legislation. But in terms of the evidence so far, the payments was a secondary issue.
No, I know it was that, but ultimately the impact of this will be felt by consumers and businesses. Legislative provision would be required to put it on to suppliers, and ultimately then you would have to take that into account whenever you're setting your tariffs. So ultimately, one way or another, consumers are paying for this and not the provider. Okay, that's useful on that. You'll provide that to the Minister by end of April, and then we'll make a decision. Have you given any thought if there's legislative time frame within the current mandate, regardless of what recommendation your board makes, that this could even be introduced within the Assembly in the current mandate? My
understanding with meetings with DFE officials is that it's still possible to lay the regs in time for next winter.
Okay, no problem at all. And maybe then open up to colleagues in relation to this section. Is there anyone who wants to speak on the GSS stuff? David, are you on this?
Sorry, you're muted.
You're muted there. We need our technical. There you go.
Yes.
Oh, he's muted again.
Oh, he's muted again. Sorry.
Okay,
there you go.
Now
You're back.
You're back. No, he's off.
Right.
David, I think you're switching yourself off. Okay, try again.
There you go.
Yeah, that's me on now, is it?
Yeah. No, you're off again. Right. There you go.
Unmuted me?
Yeah.
Oh, doing it again.
Right, we'll stick to the room. Is there anyone in the room? Diane, did you want to ask anything?
Wasn't
on
on
the
GSS, are you splitting it up that
Yeah,
way?
I'm going to split it up just on
Yeah,
that.
no.
Not on this one, okay. Right. Let's try David one more time.
He's just dancing.
Yeah, is that me?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just been flicking on my screen back and forward. I have other questions and other stuff, but the GSS, I suppose, the concern is that we're driving the price of bills up for ordinary people. Kind of that's the concern I would have. But can I just ask, if this an annual then cost? You're talking about £25 for business, 15 for domestic. Is that just added on from here on in generically, if that was the option that they went for, or is this a retrospective after we have a storm? You would then do it in that period, or are we just increasing price?
So the way we modelled it in the consultation paper was we pulled together how much Stormy Owen would have costed for each of those four options. And whenever I quote the £15 and the £25, that will be how much it would cost for 1 year to pay out each one of those options because of the Stormy Owen. So it would be 1 year. So of course, if that was going to be paid over a number of years, it would be less. But that was just the way we wanted to reflect it, to show how much it would cost for 1 year.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you're not adding that on automatically, because Stormy Owen was obviously once in a, and I appreciate that this might happen again and again, but it was a one-off event. What I'm saying is that we're not adding that 15, or not proposing adding the 25 and 15 pounds on the people's bills.
We're not.
On an ongoing basis. No problem.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair.
And based on the evidence and research, it's the payments are a secondary issue, and it's really all about building resilience to the network.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed
Totally
to
agree.
paying
Totally agree.
compensation.
Yeah, it's based on the weather events, David. So, if there was another Storm AO, and that's how much it would cost. But if there were
If it was
less or
if it was a
more
less
frequent,
severe storm,
Yeah, what I'm saying now, so what I was concerned is we're just now sort of we just add that continually onto somebody's bill. That's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
We're not doing that. Yeah. No, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can then just go on to interconnection. So in your previous work, you had highlighted the importance of both the North-South interconnector and then GB into Northern Ireland. Is that still the position that we need both?
So we need, as a priority, we need the North-South interconnector. So the single electricity market that operates doesn't operate efficiently because of the electricity cannot transfer from Northern Ireland to Ireland and vice versa effectively. Colin, you lead on the single electricity market. I don't know if you want to add.
Yes, well, like in terms of this second North-South interconnector, it'll have benefits in terms of price, security of supply, in terms of diversity of supply. It'll have a big benefit from that perspective. It'll also help us reduce constraints on the electricity system as well, which will mean we'll be able to accommodate more renewables on the system at one time. So there's many benefits for it. So yes, from our perspective, it's still needed.
So north-south interconnector, 100%. I think we're all bought into that, but I'm just keen to get the view. In your previous forward work plan, you had also highlighted the importance of a NIGB interconnector. Is that still the position?
Yes, so that's one of our work programmes we're continuing to work through on that. So we're looking to see whether we establish a framework for further interconnection between SEA and GB, or from Northern Ireland and GB. We've got an application in for the Lyric interconnector, and we have established a two-step process for that. So we've issued a licence to Lyric. The next step is then looking at whether there should be what we term an operating revenue regime for that interconnector, and that's essentially a revenue support mechanism for that interconnector. So we issued a consultation just before Christmas around that, and that was looking at two things. One, what assessment criteria we should look at as to whether we introduce that revenue support mechanism, and two, what would the structure of that revenue support mechanism look like. And that consultation recently closed. And our work over the next number of months is carrying out that analysis, looking at modelling the system benefits, looking at the economic benefits, and whether we should introduce such a mechanism or not. And we expect to be issuing a draft position by the end of this year on that.
And the lack of an interconnection policy from the Department of the Economy at present, helpful or unhelpful?
Clearly, we've engaged quite extensively with our colleagues in the department on this here. We're aware of some of the developments in terms of interconnector policy, and really what we want to do is make sure that we align any of our final decisions with the interconnector policy coming out, which we understand is due to come out by the end of this year.
So helpful or unhelpful that we do that?
It'd certainly be helpful when it comes to final decisions, in terms of having the clear policy aligning with any decisions that we make.
What about long-term duration storage policy? Helpful or unhelpful that we don't have one of those currently?
As I understand, again, the department are expecting to have a policy in that by the end of this year, and clearly, if there's a clear policy on that, that makes it more straightforward for us in terms of implementing that policy.
So unhelpful that we don't have one?
Clearly be helpful once we do have one now. Yeah.
How regulation works is policy is set and then regulation follows it, so it would always be helpful. Policy was in place. Yeah.
Okay. And then just finally for me is just in relation to the subject of the electricity support that was announced by UKG end of November. I'm just wanting to try and ascertain a timeline from your perspective. So John, as the utility regulator, when did you first become aware that financial support would be available to consumers in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so we've had 4 interactions on this. So on Wednesday, 18th of February, we received a call from DFE asking for technical support around 81 million. Then on the 19th of February, the Utility Regulator Chair met with the Economy Minister and we agreed to provide technical support. On the 24th of February, the Utility Regulator attended Treasury Bill Discount Workshop with colleagues both from DFE and DESNES, and then on Friday the 13th of March the URR had a call with senior colleagues from DFE on the design options for the business case.
Yep.
So
was the first that the utility regulator became aware of it was the 18th of February?
18th of February.
There was also, just to confirm, there was operational engagement with the department officials and the operational teams around things like the NIRO, how it worked, in terms of other aspects around the scheme. So I think it was at an operational level, not at a senior level, but at an operational level, there were discussions around schemes.
When did they start, Brian?
They started in around the beginning of this year.
Okay. And just from a UR perspective, when you seen the announcement made by the Chancellor, you didn't clock that this may or may not impact in Northern Ireland?
We were asking questions from then on whether that would impact Northern Ireland.
You were asking the Department for the Economy questions?
Yeah.
Do you know when you first contacted the Department for the Economy?
It would have been soon after the budget announcement.
So December of last year?
Just in general conversation.
Of course.
Yeah.
So December last year?
Yeah. We'd have to check back on our notes, but from the announcement, we were interested in seeing what impact it would have in Northern Ireland.
And then that was only confirmed to you that it would have an impact in Northern Ireland on the 18th of February.
Yeah, 18th of February, we received a call asking for technical support around that.
Do you know what the delay was between you requesting that information and impact in Northern Ireland here in the start of December and not then receiving feedback on that until the 18th of February?
No, we don't know the reasons for that.
Okay. And then business case, you were asked to support, did you just say? You were asked to provide technical support to create the business case?
Yes, on the technical options that
Yep.
could, yeah.
And do you know how far advanced the business case is at this stage?
I'll do it to Brian, who's been involved in those discussions.
Yeah, so the key role that we've played is really around the technical implementation of different options, the positives, the negatives, the impacts of different options that could be used to deliver the scheme. In terms of the business case itself, the drafting of the business case itself, we wouldn't have any oversight of that, and we also wouldn't have any oversight, just to confirm, around sort of departmental discussions with colleagues in DESNES or HM Treasury. We just wouldn't be privy to that. The business case would be drafted by department officials.
Would you not provide your expertise supporting how it would be drawn up?
Yeah, well, if any, they would have a lot of questions on different design options. For example, was we met with DFE and College from DESNES, we put forward a couple of design options.
What were they?
So one of them was around sort of like an EPG type scheme to see if, put directly into consumer bills. Another option that's been looked at would be around potentially working with NIE to take money off some of the use of system charges, to essentially put the 30 million potentially in year one into that pot of money, and then it comes off the tariff. So it's like a wash through, and then consumers get 3% less or whatever it is on their tariff. So that's, I think it's probably fair to say, that's something that's being discussed in more detail. And actually this afternoon there's a meeting with DFE officials, ourselves, NIE and suppliers to discuss that in further detail.
You don't know what option has been selected at this stage?
Not 100%, but I believe that probably the more likely option that's been looked at in more detail would be the use of system reduction.
John, would you be able to provide the committee just in terms of the correspondence you've had with the department on this, particularly in and around December 2025?
Yeah, I think it was verbal conversations
Sure.
and meetings, so I don't know if there was any written correspondence, but we can check through our records.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. David.
Thanks, and thanks for coming in. Just something you've said there, just to pick up on. We've talked about there's been a lot of talk about a targeted response rather than just a generic reduction. Is that possible to do?
So to be perfectly honest with you, none of the options are easy to implement. The way our market works is different than GB. For example, we do price regulation on Power and I, so we would see all the different elements of the Power and I bill that goes into making up that final sort of cost to each consumer. We can look at in theory, we do detailed analysis from NIE in terms of their requirements. That's the JUOS part of the bill, and we are the department is in discussions with NIE to see if whether NIE have any sort of issues with that being implemented. But it's fair to say that these are being worked through. We have sight of some of that information, but not all of it, because we're not in the room for each conversation.
David, I think the issue, we supported the UK government on the previous support scheme. The real problem is the data sets. So you've got a data set where you know who's on benefit. You've got a data set that you know everyone who's an electricity customer, everyone who's a gas customer. What you don't know is who's on oil. Now you could make a proxy between the two, but in the end of the day, the UK government decided that they weren't comfortable with that, and that's why the benefit was given to everybody. So it is the data. There isn't the data set to give you exactly who is an oil customer in Northern Ireland.
Okay. Can I run through a couple of things that you talked about the grid there, and you talked about the interconnection and the grid, and you talked about policies coming. That's all we've heard for 2 years, to be honest. Is there a plan to align all of this? So we've got all of these different policies in transition as well. Is there who leads all of this? Is that a role for yourselves, or is this coming directly from the department?
The department sets the policy, and then we enact it into regulations, so
Okay.
it works on the ground. So the policy decision would be made by the department.
So a lot of these areas have been consulted on by the department. So the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan was consulted on a couple of years ago, and that covers LDES, a lot of these different areas. So that was quite a broad consultation, and then it's narrowed down into the different policy areas. So we're supporting the department where we can, and then the department also leads on certain sectors within the Climate Action Plan, and that's where the numbers would flow through in terms of impact and emissions and things like that. But essentially this all converges on a whole system approach, and it's not just DFE, it's across DERA, for example, and the biomethane interdepartmental group as well would feed into that.
I suppose my concern is it isn't that coordinated, and we're not seeing that coordinated response. We're not seeing this brought together. Now, if the grid, the smart meter, and planning, if you like, interconnection, all of this is not coming as one. And how do we deliver that transition if I suppose you're the ones delivering, you're at the other end of it, but frankly, is there enough resources in the department, the energy section of the department, to actually deliver this on time?
I don't know if we could comment on that.
I'll give you one. Pick them one by one. Smart metering. Yep. Like, we're the only region of any other area to not have smart meters. It feels like we've been talking about it for 2 years. Is it any further? Is there anything you're seeing that'll be progressed?
We are so we're not the only. Germany is the main country that doesn't have smart meters, and for various reasons. There's a lot of countries that have made mistakes around smart meters. So there is some benefits to being a follower. It's then seeing now, can the NIE afford the smart meter rollout? What is the speed of the smart meter rollout? What are we expecting the technology, the smart meter to provide? What, are we making it future-proof in terms of, previous... there's a lot of regions that are struggling that had 3G smart meters, now need 5G smart meters brought in. So it's all those kind of things of how it's going to be, the technology behind it, what it's going to look like, and then ultimately how the customer is going to use it. So that's the tariff project. Can we, can we develop tariffs that it's cheaper to use it at night to charge your electric vehicle and one thing and another. So it's all these things are in play.
I understand that, John, but 2 years ago we had the same discussion and the same questions and the same things. When does anything ever come to actually delivery?
I think it's probably fair to say on the smart meter, so I sort of sit in the smart meter delivery group with colleagues from the department. We met just last week. My understanding is that a paper, high level design, has been drafted. It's final sort of revisions and refinements, and it's not that. Well, I can't speak for the department, but my understanding is that it's not far away and could come out fairly soon. And also, to be fair to the department, their clear instruction last week was we need to now get into delivery mode. We need to start working up expert groups. We need to start getting suppliers engaged, NIE engaged, the Consumer Council engaged, and indeed consumers engaged. Because if we don't get buy-in from consumers, we're not going to realise the benefits of this scheme. They sit at the heart of it. So I do think there's a paper that's very close to being drafted or very close to being finalised, and it should be out hopefully soon enough. But again, I can't say that with certainty.
Okay, no, appreciate that. And then finally for me, we've got the utility regulator bill coming through. You mentioned oil and not knowing where thing. Is there a missed opportunity about not including the regulation of home heating oil into that bill?
That's really a political or assembly or departmental decision. We will regulate what's in statute for us to regulate. The bill that's been proposed will kind of allow us to provide technical advice to the department on energy transition issues. But really it is a matter for politicians at the executive level or assembly level to decide whether they want to do something around the regulation of heating oil.
And so then, as the regulator, John, have you got the capability to be able to regulate oil if that decision was made?
We would have to look at, you know, what that would mean in terms of resources and one thing and another, but technical capability, that regulation is what we do.
Yeah. Okay. No bother. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Padraig?
Thanks, and thanks for your answers so far. I suppose, like, it is good to hear the progress on all of these issues, and really, to see that things are progressing in this space as well. I suppose one of the elements that I'm really interested in, as David has mentioned there, just following on, is the smart metering, and the opportunities that it presents, but also within that, we also have to be conscious of people who may be digitally isolated, who may not at the minute have, I suppose, the capabilities to do that. And I know that's a discussion that we've had previously with the team as well. I know you've been doing a huge amount of work around that. So I'm keen to understand, I suppose, what conversations are happening in that space to make sure that when we have such a positive policy being brought forward, how do we ensure that that reaches every household, and how do we ensure that there's real impact for people right across the north?
Yeah, so, consumer protection is first and foremost what we do. So it's essential when we're in these discussions that we ensure that no one's left behind. But Brian, Barbara, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I mean, in terms of the structure, I know the Brian's already mentioned the delivery group. Under the delivery group, we have a number of expert groups, and because smart meters customers are centric to how they're going to operate, we're going to actually have 2 consumer groups, one of which is going to deliver the consumer education piece. So that work is starting with that. CC and I are going to lead on that group, and we're going to lead on another group which is around the consumer regulations, making sure that all the protections are there as we move into smart meters. So educating consumers, reaching out to consumers and explaining things, because smart meters are not going to work if consumers are not engaged, and that's a key objective of that one group that's going to be tasked with that.
Absolutely, and I suppose that's the important part for me, is that it reaches people, because what we could end up having is that people who are already maybe have that, I suppose, greater element of economic flexibility and support would actually, I suppose the gap would widen, in short. So I'm really glad to hear that. Just moving back a little bit, because quite a number of the points around the GSS have been covered. I suppose I wanted to just link in on the priority list that you've mentioned as well. Just in a similar sort of vein, obviously a great piece of work. I would like to kind of understand that process a bit better in terms of exactly how that works, the indicative time frame, what team are working on that and so on, because I think that it does offer a huge opportunity. And it's really about that resilience piece, that forward planning piece, which is essential to all of this. So keen to hear a bit more on that.
So this will be the first time ever that anyone, as we can see, will bring Redchester in for all the different utilities. So at the moment, if you've got a vulnerable situation, you have to register with the network company for both electricity and gas. You have to register for your supplier and for NI Water. So potentially you have to register on 5 registers. This will bring 1 register. But Barbara, I don't know if you...
I mean, it really is an ambitious project. As John has said, we currently have 9 registers across the network operators, the gas and electricity suppliers. And the first phase of this project is to bring 1 energy register together. And the key to that and the objective of that is to make sure that customers are identified, supported and protected. So this is all customers who are in vulnerable circumstances across Northern Ireland. And it will absolutely decrease the burden. It's going to be a tell me once. They'll only have to tell their provider once. So we're going to amalgamate it all into 1 energy. That's the first phase. In parallel, we're going to work with the water company for their register, and then the second phase will be to amalgamate the energy and the water register into 1 utility register. So it is quite trailblazing in terms of what we're planning to do. The other changes, we're going to move the register into 2 aspects. There's going to be 2 tiers. There's going to be the medical tier, which you're aware of. That's the medical register we have at the minute. And then there's going to be a needs-based tier where consumers will register the needs and support the need as opposed to what their vulnerability is. So at the minute, I know you asked about timelines. I don't know what they are at the minute. I would be very reluctant to say what they are. It's a key project within our forward work plan. We have engaged extensively with industry, and we have buy-in with industry for this project. And we are currently putting out for a project manager. And once a project manager is in place, we'll be able to work up the project plans with the industry working groups and have a realistic view on what the timeline will be for phase 1.
And working closely also with the ICO to make
Yes,
sure
to
there's
make
no
sure the data protection's right.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Okay. No, that's excellent, and it is obviously a hugely ambitious piece of work, but one that's really essential in terms of that resilience piece. So, look, I'm delighted to hear that there is the support from the department, and I suppose there's so many elements which we've already talked through today, which both yourselves and the department are working on collegiately, and I think that it's very important that as a committee we maybe don't lose sight of the breadth of that and the scale of that. And obviously there will be differing timelines on some of it, but the ambition and the scale of this is absolutely huge. There are a few other points that I have to make, but I'll wait because I'm conscious that we're doing this in parts, the questioning, so we'll come back in a few minutes. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your evidence. Brian, you had mentioned how the decision on the smart metering will probably come quite soon, and I just wanted to pick up, John, you had said about the question being about could NIE afford the rollout. So my understanding is that the costs associated with this are quite significant, in the region of 400 to 500 million pounds. I just want to ask if you could detail how would those costs be met?
It would be through the price control process, but probably Brian, do you want to?
Yeah, so there's different probably elements to this. One is the actual meter and the meters themselves. Obviously, there's a cost associated with each one that's going to be rolled out. The real cost as well is the back end IT systems and how they link up to supplier systems to enable suppliers to offer customers different products, different rates, possibly demand side as well, and different solutions. So I'd say it could be higher even again than into the late hundreds of millions. Just depend on. We don't know really what the overall cost is going to be. In terms of how it's going to be, cost is going to be recovered, it'll be through, obviously, the NIE price control, if NIE are the delivery body. Different elements of that will be covered over different periods of time. It might be IT systems would be, say, 10 years potentially, and the meters would be over, say, 15, 20 years, depends on the asset life. So again, we're working that out, and the impact and the borrowings that NIE will have to undertake in order to roll out will depend on the speed of the rollout, what's prioritised first, etc., or do we do it all in parallel? And then the actual financial implications on that probably at the minute aren't known, because obviously we have to go through a project design and delivery, because the length of the rollout will depend on how much borrowings and when will be required. So that sort of still needs to be worked through, I would imagine, with NIE.
And if the department are keen to move on this quite quickly, will this be able to be adjusted before the next price control period?
Yes, so I believe not the expert in price, but there's an ability for NI to open up the price control, to say, right, these are now costs that our business is going to incur, and then obviously they'll have price submissions around, this is the amount of money we will need and how we will recover it, and then obviously that'll come to our office, we'll consider it, and our board will make the necessary approvals.
So the current price control with NIE runs till 2031, so yeah, you're right. There's a mechanism to open costs in this space, and at the time the price control was being developed for RP7, it wasn't known really, so we couldn't include it within RP7. So RP7 was a massive investment, £2.23 billion, but we couldn't put a big unknown in the price control for smart meters. So as Brian says, it's significant cost, depends on the policy, it depends on the timeline. We're appointing a project manager to work through all that, so we have better sight of it, and we can work with NIE on what would be needed to deliver this. So we're working very closely with DFE and NIE in this.
And as you say, you'd expected a decision quickly, like you think within weeks, months?
Weeks or months, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's just obviously we don't have sight of when, but that's the expectation.
Okay, thank you. And are we jumping on too?
Go on ahead,
enough, yeah. I just wanted to pick up on offshore wind. So I represent South Down coastal constituency, and this is quite topical in the area. And I just wanted to ask, as you're developing the policies and things around that, it's quite a specialised area, and I just wondered around your staff and resources, the expertise in that area, and are you closely engaging with the fishing community who are heavily affected by this, right across from the Kilkeel coast right up to Ardglass and beyond up to Portoboggie?
So we're looking at the regulatory framework, what that would mean in terms of how would you regulate the offshore network and how would you pay for the offshore network. So no, I don't, unless...
Yeah, so the department leads on that, so they have a group called they have a group and a plan, so the Offshore Renewable Energy Action Plan, and that group engages with all the stakeholders you've mentioned. So I know the department is speaking to all of them about that. As John says, we're looking at the reg side, so delivery of the offshore assets, who owns them, how's that financed, and it depends how the legislation and the policy set up really.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask around a timeline for development of it, because there's a lot of talk going on around it, but there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of specifics.
So the department confirmed just before you joined, Vice Chair, that the policy will not be developable in this mandate.
Okay, thank you. Well, appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
Sinead?
Good morning, and thank you for your evidence and answers to date. I want to pick up on the last question about the offshore renewables. Just in the absence of that, is it likely that the 2030 renewable generation target can be achieved in the absence?
I think offshore was always towards the end of the 2030, but
So the target around offshore that the department set out is 1 gigawatt from 2030. So offshore was never envisaged to contribute to the 80% target in the Climate Change Act.
So it'll have no impact at all?
No, it'll be after 2030, yeah.
Okay. Given the current instability, obviously, in the Middle East, how important is it that the decarbonisation bill is introduced quickly and without delay?
I think there's two things. It's always useful to have the bill introduced, but Northern Ireland is dependent on natural gas for electricity generation and probably will be for several decades. So we'll always be impacted by the cost of natural gas. So you need gas-fired power stations for when the wind doesn't blow, when the sun doesn't shine, and you also need it for system stability reasons. And at the moment, there's no other technology available to Northern Ireland bar gas. So you could make it more renewable by using natural gas, biogas and things like that. But essentially, it would be tied to the international price for a number of decades, and that makes pricing difficult going forward. But Colin, I don't, from a markets perspective.
No, I think that's right in terms of there'll be a requirement from security supply point of view for gas for some time. There will be benefits in terms of additional renewables that will lessen the influence in terms of the market prices on gas, and in particular if we introduce a scheme which has been proposed around having a contract for difference scheme where if the price in the market goes up, then there's a payback under that contract from the renewables, and that will create a protection from consumers. So the further rollout of renewables will have an impact and will dampen the effect in terms of market prices. But we're going to need natural gas for the foreseeable future in any case.
Joan, from your perspective, is there anything that the executive could do right now that would help make your work easier and help deliver lower and more stable energy costs for consumers in the absence of the legislation coming forward?
Well, ideally, our energy legislation hasn't been updated since 2003. If our legislation was brought up to the same level it was with Ofgem or Ireland's CRU, that would significantly help our work. It would make it easier, to have the ability to give interconnector licenses, to give battery licenses, and various things like that. So, yes, we would ideally like our legislation to be in line with our two nearest regulators, and it's also then seeing alignment on the all-island market with European markets going forward.
And how important is that in order to, I suppose, attract investment into the energy system?
I think for investors that aren't readily know Northern Ireland, it's harder to attract them when there's differences with other regulators, but there's workarounds, but it would make it a lot easier and a lot more legally secure if we had the similar legislation to Ofgem and CIU.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sinead. Declan?
Thanks, Philip. Can I go back to the electric support scheme briefly? Just a couple of points. So as I understand it, DFA officials were engaged directly with the Treasury from the 27th of November when they became aware of the potential, well, the support in Britain, and the British Treasury was refusing to extend the scheme to the north. And then that changed on the 19th of December with an agreement that there would be an extension of the scheme. And then I think it was Brian, or maybe yourself, John, said that from the beginning of the year, from the beginning of January, there was involvement by the utility regulator in relation to the development of an operational scheme.
It's from the 18th of February.
Okay, but there was a reference to operational discussions around the scheme at the start of the year.
So in terms of, so the 18th of February was the director level engagement, and there was at the operation team, for example, like we would have a team that helps administer the ROCs. Yeah. There was operational discussions with department officials. That's what I mean by operational teams. Yes. The exact sort of content of that I don't have to hand. You know, I wasn't on those email chains a lot of, but there was some discussions at operational level to understand the ROCs and how that works, and to work out, I think, probably the cost and things like that.
Yeah. And would that be at your end, Brian?
It'd be with my operational teams, yeah.
So it would have been people under your direction?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was just trying to work out where it fitted within the architecture of the organisation.
That's about how they were asking about how the schemes worked, not about support around the rollout of the 81 million.
Yeah, it was again, it's probably coming down to the back end sort of knowledge and understanding. It's probably where the operational teams were coming in on how that, but in terms of the director level engagement in late February, I received a call, it was with myself, sort of saying, look, we want to develop a scheme, can you help us with the real sort of optioneering here around delivery? And that's sort of probably the difference between the two.
It's okay, and that takes us to your point about the 18th of February. And then can you confirm that on the 19th of February the chair met directly with the minister to discuss implementation of the scheme?
No, it was whether we would provide technical support
Yes.
to help the department. Yes.
Discuss implementation of the scheme. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Philip.
Yeah, no problem at all. Kate.
Thank you, and apologies for coming in late. Wanted to make sure I didn't want to ask questions in case some of it had already been covered. There are a couple of things that I'm interested in, and the first was around regulation of home heating oil. Why don't Germany regulate? You said.
Sorry, no smart meters. They've got no smart meters.
There were smart meters. Sorry.
Yes.
Why are there no smart meters?
I think it's for historic reasons. It's for cultural reasons. Germans don't like people knowing what happens in their own household, so they use cash more than credit cards. They don't like people understanding their energy, because from a smart meter you could essentially tell whether someone was in their house or they're not in their house by their usage. And it's just cultural. It's a cultural issue.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think around smart metering, and I put in question to the minister as well. And it was good to hear what you were saying about kind of engagement. Would your assessment be the same, that maybe the public understanding of the benefits of smart metering isn't quite there yet, and we have quite a bit to do?
It would be, yes, there is quite a bit to do, but it's definitely a priority in terms of how we're going to move it forward.
I think it's changed over time as well. So when smart meters were first brought in, they were mainly seen as an energy efficiency measure. Mm-hmm. So you could see on your wall whether you were using energy, whether to turn down. But as smart meters have rolled out, people realise you can use it more for dynamic tariffs. So you can have different there's financial options and things like that. So as people have developed the usage of smart meters over the last decade or so, you're starting to see the difference. So that needs to be communicated to consumers, because 10 years ago you know, it would have been very much seen as an energy efficiency measure, that you would be turning off your, you know, making sure your lights are turned off, you've turned off your TV, and one thing and another. But now there's a lot more functionality to a smart meter than the original ones.
Yeah.
But that consumer piece is so important here because we are following what's happened elsewhere. So I worked in Ofgem for a long time, and there was the smart meter rollout there didn't go well. I didn't work on it, but it didn't go well because the first meters were called SMETS 1. So you had a meter that was smart, but if you changed supplier, the meter went dumb. So then you moved on to SMETS 2, but there was a lot in the press that people here will have seen, and they won't understand, you know, are we going to have the same issue if I change supplier, do I have to change meter? It's not the case. So that consumer piece is really important to explain what's that kit actually going to do and what will happen in these different scenarios. So the consumer piece is incredibly important.
Focusing on the benefits, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. The point then that I was going to ask about home heating oil was about data. I'm really interested in how we use data to create proper policy solutions to things. What conversations have there been around that, and kind of what's the key piece that's missing?
Well, we haven't been involved at this stage but when we were doing the previous UK government scheme, the UK government wanted to target people who were on home heating oil, and there wasn't a way of finding out that data set. So I say you can find out who's on benefits, you can find out who's on electricity, you can find out who's on gas, but you can't accurately work out.
There's been no kind of, I suppose because we're trying to move away from home heating oil, they're probably not investing in it as much, but there've been no conversations about how.
Not with us.
No. Okay, that's interesting. And then, most of what else I wanted to ask was raised, but your point about the fact that energy policy hasn't been updated or majorly overhauled since 2003, I think it's wild.
Well, regulation around the
regulation, yeah. I mean, and when you think of how much things are changing, why is that? Just because it's so complex?
I think it is. But from our perspective, you know, there's a lot of things around consumer protection measures that we would like to undertake, you know, and from Brian's side, from developing the network, we need, you know, that legal basis around interconnectors, batteries. Now, there's workarounds that we've done, but, you know, to make it firmly secure, we would ideally like that legislation to match where our counterparts are.
Yeah, I suppose that's the reason why it all feels quite fragmented. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Padraig, you want to back in, sir?
No, Chair, that's everything covered on this point. I'll come back on later, thanks.
I'm going to go on ahead now that no one else has indicated.
So, well, it was really around the data, but Kate has kind of covered that. I suppose that is something that I'm quite interested in, is around the data and actually how we collect that, and you, Kate, would be coming on it, which is why I thought I might wait till later. I do think it's quite concerning because obviously it allows, you know, when we are trying to do targeted approaches, it firstly curtails the ability to do so, but then you know, going forward, it just, I suppose, allows us to be a lot less targeted in what we do, particularly in and around British government schemes when we're looking at how we do those. But I think the points I wanted to be raised have been largely covered by both Kate and Declan, so I'm content. Thanks.
Thank you, Padraig. Okay, and then just finally from me, colleagues, just to pick up on what Sinead had raised in relation to the renewable targets, particularly the 2030 one. Have you got an official position in terms of the likelihood or not of reaching the 80% figure by 2030?
We haven't done any calculations of where we will come in terms of that. It will be difficult, you know, but we just need to make sure we do it in the most affordable way for consumers here in Northern Ireland.
I keep hearing it's going to be difficult, and then I just look at the facts. So the facts are the percentage of energy renewable consumption is what, 44% at the minute?
47, I think.
That's maybe slightly higher.
40,
I think there's some new
the latest figures the department published in November said 44, so you're saying it's up to 47 now?
44, 47, I think you're right. I can just... It's between 44 and 47, but yeah.
No problem. We're not going to have any additional major schemes in your view that will move the dial massively on this that'll have gone through legislation be delivered?
It's a renewable energy support scheme. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
There's a range of things
Yeah.
that I think you can do to move the dial. I think though it's important to match. I think the first thing is your grid. You have to have a grid that can carry your renewable electrons from one part to the other. There's no point building loads of extra wind if they can't be utilised. So I think the first thing is utilisation, and that comes with your grid.
What's the current dispatch down rate?
Current dispatch down
27%?
rate, I think it's reduced, but it's sitting around 20-25% at the minute. So 1 in 4, you can nearly say, of our electrons produced is not being utilised today. Different reasons for that.
Yep.
The second one is that you obviously have to build your rollout of renewables, and that's important. But there, again, this links very closely. It should link with your grid that can support them. Try and incentivise them to build in areas where it's strongest, where the grid can facilitate at least cost for maintenance and development. The third thing is a demand strategy. You have to, if you're going to build a lot more renewables, you have to have people who can consume that renewables, or else that sits with the consumer. So I think you need a demand strategy as well. The other thing as well is around batteries. So whenever wind isn't, it's not predictable. And if that's going to be the thing that underpins us, we will need a certain amount of energy storage, but we need to be strategic in where we've very high levels of fuel poverty and very low levels of disposable income. So we have to be strategic as to how much we wind to maximise its usage. When we think about storage, we need to think about maximising the benefits from it, and we think about our grid rollout, maximising that, and that's where smart meters as well, behavioural issues as well come in. So I think the point made earlier was it's very complex. It is. Can be all delivered in 2030. It's ambitious. It's a very challenging target that's been set. But can you move the dial towards 2030? Like, there is certain things you should be looking to do in terms of your network and things you can do that can help. Yes.
So, in your professional opinion, 80% target by 2030, will it be met? Yes or no?
It'd be difficult to meet. I don't think you can say definitively yes or no.
In your professional opinion,
professional things can be very difficult.
John. In your professional opinion, will it be met, yes or no?
It's difficult to see how it can be met. Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, can I thank you on behalf of the committee for all of your work. There's really important work for us to be doing and supporting you, and no doubt when the UR bill arrives, we will engage extensively with you to ensure that piece of legislation updates our regulatory framework to give you the support and resources that you need to keep delivering for the people of Northern Ireland. So thank you very much for your work.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter.
So members, by way of follow-up, is the committee content to write to the utility regulator just seeking a timeline on whatever correspondence they can share in respect of their exchanges with DFE around the energy bill support measures. Members are content with that?
Yep.
Also, Chairperson, members, look, apologies, this is my fault. There's a mistake in the papers I've given you. Apologies to Sinead who asked the question. It's the 1 gigawatt of offshore wind energy generation is from 2030. The utility regulator is absolutely right, and that's what the Energy Action Plan says. I've written by. So, but look, where I was coming from was to get to the 80%. I reckon that it was about 1.8 gigawatts. It would be tricky to do all of that onshore. So you would probably have to have offshore, and offshore isn't going to be available by 2030. So further to the point that the chairperson made, is a committee content to write to the department just seeking the timeline for the development of the offshore renewable energy policy and plans?
Yeah, Chair, just can I come in there as well? I suppose the fact that we got evidence from the department a couple of weeks ago, and there were real concerns about the staffing levels, I suppose, in developing this policy, and that it seems like even after 2030 is probably quite ambitious at the level and the pace that they're going at. I mean, the department themselves expressed concern about their own resources in this. So I think there is problems right around or regardless of the actual the date, and the fact that none of this is going to be coming into play to meet any of those targets, the targets for 2030.
Okay.
Members content. Oh, sorry, Patrick.
Oh, Patrick, apologies, sir.
Well, no, it's just a technical point. So, I mean, I had obviously heard those same concerns when the relevant department officials were in, but my concerns were quite, I suppose, alleviated by the fact that when we actually look through, I know they are bringing additional staff, and I think they said from the summer. So I am conscious that while they have mentioned that they're limited staff at present, that there have already been measures taken to address that. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that the department are doing a huge amount of work and have committed additional resources to that.
Thank you, Patrick.
I think to record that in the minutes.
We'll record that. That's perfect. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, we're going to move on to item 7, which is the Higher Education Financial Needs Assessment, Oral and Written Evidence. The committee will now receive evidence from the department officials in respect of the Higher Education Financial Needs Assessment and refer members to the clerk's covering note at page 6 of tabled items, a departmental briefing at page 16 of tabled papers, recent departmental correspondence providing an update on the Higher Education Financial Needs Assessment, page 183 of the meeting pack, the terms of reference, and the departmental spending bids for higher education at page 196. On behalf of the committee, can I welcome Graham Miller, Acting Director of Higher Education, Elaine Dolan, Head of Higher Education Funding Review, Joanne Hendry, who is the Head of Higher Education Finance, and June, apologies, Faccini, my apologies, Head of Higher Education Research. So firstly, can I welcome you on behalf of the committee, but can I express concern at the delay in which these papers were received by the committee? I delayed this briefing by a week. Papers were only received by our departmental clerk team on Monday evening, which meant that they were only made available to members yesterday, which is obviously a public holiday and doesn't give members, in my view, the right time to try and get into the detail of what is a very, very important piece of work. I know you require political clearance to have your papers submitted to the department and then to arrive with us, but for this to arrive less than 24 hours before you appear before the committee to give this important view is, in my view, not acceptable. And I just want to make that clear. You have a request into the committee to have this session enclosed. Can you just outline to the committee why you want to do that, and then we can make a decision on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I fully understand the frustrations of the members of this committee in terms of the timeliness or lack of in terms of the papers arriving. So I apologise for that. That was for matters outside of the control of the department. We have said all the way through this that we would engage with the HEIs, and the Minister has been very clear on that. And we only received the last piece of feedback, which when we shared the confidential full report with all the HEIs, and we shared that on the 4th, and we got the last piece of feedback on the 12th of March, which was last Thursday. That only allowed us to complete the advice and to go up to the Minister, and so that is the reason for those matters outside of our control. So I do completely understand the frustrations of the committee. In terms of the why we have requested a closed session this morning, Chair, we have undertaken a public interest test as officials, and that was part of our engagement, I should add, with the HEIs in terms of did they consider the content, detailed content within the detailed report, either being part of government policy under development, or under section 43(2) of the FOI Act, whether there was an exemption that could harm the commercial interests of the HEIs. 3 of the HEIs came back and confirmed that their preference was that the report would not be published in full, and that the department should only publish a departmental summary, which we've also shared with the committee. 1 HEI came back and said that in view of full transparency, that it should be published. And then 1 final HEI came back and said that the department should publish it as it wishes, and Elaine will confirm the wording of that. Yeah. So we have undertaken a public interest test, and we have determined, the department has determined, that the full report will not be published. the Minister will publish the departmental summary, and that is on the basis of Section 35(1)(a) of Freedom of Information Act. Therefore, if we go into closed session today, Chair, we will be able to obviously discuss the findings of the report, which has been shared with the committee on a confidential basis, in more detail. If we do not go into open session, if we remain in open session, our answers will be restricted to the departmental summary document, which the Minister and the Department plans to publish in due course.
Okay, so there will be a departmental summary of the report that will be published?
And yes, there is a departmental summary, and the Minister has indicated that the Department will publish that.
Okay. Members have any views on how they wish to proceed on this? I'm in your hands.
I'm generally uncomfortable having sessions that are closed. So my preference would be to have an open session just for transparency.
And I agree, Philip. It's always preferable to have issues transparently presented. However, the committee is left with a Hobson's choice here. If we proceed with open session, then we've been advised we won't get all of the information, and you've indicated that at least one institute, possibly two, have expressed a negative view. I would be keen to know who and why. So we're not going to get that information unless we go into closed session. So I think the balance here is the transparency, the business of the committee being in complete public session. But I think we need to have full access to all the necessary information, because that will then determine what our options are beyond this point. So on balance, I think we have to go with closed session, even though I too am uncomfortable with that approach.
Okay, I remember. Oh, sorry, Patrick.
Yes, well, just to echo that position, I think that the most pragmatic thing here is that we have all the information at our disposal, and then we can proceed accordingly. And I appreciate that this is, an unfortunate position for us to be in. I know there are commercial sensitivities around it, and therefore I do think that we'd be better with all the information in closed session, and then we can proceed.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wondered, I know I'm quite new to the committee, have we got any guidance or legal advice through the clerk as to what is determined to be commercially sensitive in this way? Because ultimately, as others said, it's public money, it's the Department for the Economy, that's here what we're to scrutinise and to put it into the public domain. So I just wondered, was there any definitive guidance around it? But echo the views of others in terms of how we proceed here, but I would be keen to hear.
No, there's not, because the department hasn't told us what the commercially in confidence information is, so I can't give you any advice. It's for members side. It's for members to decide.
Okay, I propose then that we do move into closed session, and then we will receive this, and we'll then, if we cover issues which are not required to be in closed session, we give a summary of those at the end so the public watching can hear. Members content with that?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll move into closed session. Okay, just for a summary of those watching online, the department provided an update to the committee in relation to the report done into the financial needs assessment of our higher institutions here in Northern Ireland, and members asked a number of questions in which further information will come back. Graham, you wanted to correct the record, if that's the correct term, in relation to comments you made previously at this committee?
Yes, Chair. When I was last at the committee in February, I, in evidence, said to the committee that the department would not move forward without all agreement of all the local institutions. I want to apologise. I did not intentionally mislead the committee. What I meant to have said was that it was the Minister's preference to obtain the agreement of all institutions, and that remains our intent. So I apologise.
No problem. And it's just important to note, Graham, that wasn't the first time that comment was made. Your predecessor also had made that comment last year before this committee as well. So that is obviously a change in direction and policy which had been previously outlined, so those watching at home can take what they want from that. Colleagues, is there anything anyone wants to state at this case in open session? No. Okay, we will then move into our next item then, and thank colleagues very much for their representations here this morning. Members content before we move to item 8 that we take a short committee recess to allow those who need to use the restroom. Committee's agreed, then we'll come back at around 25 to 1. Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, colleagues, move on to item 8, postgraduate tuition fee. DFE oral evidence. The committee will now receive evidence from the Department in respect to the Minister's recent decision in respect to tuition fee loans. Welcome back, Graham, and colleagues here joining you. Hand over to you at this stage.
Thank you, Chair, and it's now good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to update the committee following the recent consultation on postgraduate tuition fee loans. I am Graham Miller, as you know, Acting Director of the Higher Education Division. I am joined today by my colleagues Shauna Mullan, Head of Higher Education Policy Branch, and Johnny O'Callaghan, who's the Head of Higher Education Student Finance. Shauna's team is responsible for a wide range of matters, including student number control, liaison with UCAS on higher education admissions, all-island student mobility, social issues such as student health, mental health and ending violence against women and girls, as well as postgraduate tuition fee policy. Johnny's team is responsible for the budgeting and accounting treatment in respect of student loans and grants. This includes DEL budgets of around £70 million relating to maintenance grants, targeted support grants, education maintenance allowance and the associated costs of delivering these. He is also responsible for the AME budget in excess of £400 million relating to student loans. As the committee will be aware, following a public consultation, the Minister confirmed on 6th of March her decision to increase the maximum postgraduate tuition fee loan to £10,000 with effect from the 2026-27 academic year. The committee was formally notified of that decision, and the Minister also made a public announcement. The committee was also provided with a written briefing paper including a summary of the responses to the consultation on the 6th of March. By way of context, postgraduate education plays a crucial role in cultivating advanced skills, strengthening research capabilities and driving innovation, all of which are fundamental to the continued growth and prosperity of our economy. However, the Department's postgraduate tuition fee loan product was last reviewed in 2021, and since then tuition fees have continued to rise, creating a growing gap between the level of financial support available and the actual cost of study. Evidence gathered by the Department showed that support up to £6,500 no longer reflected typical postgraduate fees charged by local institutions, and that, without intervention, the challenges faced by students would continue to grow. Specifically, the average postgraduate course fee charged by local institutions stands at £7,900, with certain programmes costing considerably more. Consequently, students are currently required to bridge an average funding gap of approximately £1,400, making postgraduate study less accessible for many. Against that background, the Department launched a public consultation which ran from September to November 2025, seeking views on a range of options for updating postgraduate tuition fee loans. The consultation focused specifically on tuition fee support. Maintenance support was not within scope. 4 options were presented, ranging from maintaining the loan at £6,500 to increasing it to £10,000. The Department received 30 responses from a broad range of stakeholders, including current and former students, prospective students, parents, higher education staff, employers and organisations. The consultation analysis showed clear support for change. 73% of respondents agreed that increasing the loan to £10,000 offered the best solution. 18% were unsure which option would be preferable, and 9% indicated that it should remain at £6,500. Respondents also highlighted the impact that the current funding gap has on access and participation. 70% indicated that increasing the loan would make it easier for students from lower income backgrounds to participate in postgraduate study. In addition, 80% considered it very important that postgraduate support here remains competitive with provision elsewhere in these islands. Alongside support for increasing the loan, respondents raised a number of wider matters, including the absence of maintenance support, an annual uplift in line with inflation, and whether postgraduate fees should be regulated. These matters have been carefully considered by the Department and detailed in the written summary already provided to the Committee. Taking all of that evidence into account, the Minister concluded that increasing the maximum postgraduate tuition fee loan to £10,000 represents the most balanced and proportionate response. The decision ensures that the support is better aligned and with typical tuition costs, improves affordability and reduces the risk that students are deterred from postgraduate study for financial reasons, while remaining deliverable for the 2026-27 academic year. Chair, members, I hope that overview was helpful and would be very happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. Just from me firstly, I'm relatively new to the Assembly and to the processes, but in any previous public consultation that the Department has undertaken before the Minister's taken a political decision, feedback on that consultation would have come before this committee and the views of this committee would have been sought before the Minister took her final decision. It seems to be the only case in which that did not happen. And the committee was not given any forewarning of the Minister's decision. I welcome the Minister's decision, I think it's a good one, but I'm just wondering why the committee was not given its place as is usual practice.
So, Chair, ultimately the decision in terms of announcement of policy changes like this rests with the Minister. That was the Minister's decision, and if the committee wishes to write to the Department and the Minister on those matters, the Minister will respond. What I would say, though, is that we were up against a hard deadline in terms of the Student Loans Company, the SLC. They had given a hard deadline of Friday the 20th of February for the Minister and the Department to make a decision and provide a figure in order to have the system, their delivery and administrative operational delivery arrangements in place for the academic year. We were also on the critical path. We needed Treasury approval. That was received late in the afternoon of the 19th of February. So the Minister therefore made a decision, having received Treasury approval for in terms of the funding cover, and then that was communicated to the SLC on the 20th of February. And then the announcement was made on the 6th of March.
When did the Minister take the decision?
The Minister will have made the decision either on the 19th or 20th of 19th or 20th of February, because that was the decision was dependent upon approval for the funding cover from Treasury.
To go to Treasury to get approval, you would have had to have a figure, no?
So engagement, and this is where Johnny, who is the subject matter expert in all things student loans and student grants and the huge figures that I pointed out in the opening statement, will come in. There had been ongoing engagement with Treasury for some time on Treasury giving its approval in terms of affordability. The committee may be aware that I'm sure the committee is aware, the accounts for the department, the resource accounts, are disclaimed, and that they're disclaimed on two fronts, and one of those is in terms of the fair value of the student loan book. The Treasury position until the 19th of February had been that it would not make a decision on this postgraduate tuition fee loan uplift until it concluded its analysis of whether the student support package in Northern Ireland is comparable with that in England. It was on the 19th of February that the Treasury came through and said they detached that decision from the wider consideration of affordability, and they gave us the go-ahead on the basis of the hard stop provided by the SLC.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to get to here, Graham, is that in order for the Treasury to make a decision, they would have had to have been given a proposition, and the proposition obviously was the 10,000, which, as I said at the start, is the right decision that the Minister's taken. I warmly welcome it, and I think all committees support that. But what I'm trying to get to is, what date did the Minister take the position 10,000 is what we do, and then we'll engage with Treasury to get that approval?
Shauna or Johnny can come in here, but the draft consultation had the Minister's preferred approach of 10,000, and so engagement with Treasury, which Johnny will now come in on, was that the engagement with Treasury was on that basis.
Initial engagement with Treasury was in August 25, and we set out the options of the consultation, and we sought approval in principle of up to £10,000. So all of the options were still in play, but we sought approval in principle for the highest one to give us the maximum budget cover.
And they didn't come through with that until the 19th? Okay. And then, in terms of the impact you think this will have on postgraduate student numbers at our institutions, have you done any work on that?
Turn to my colleagues on that.
Yeah, well, we currently have 2,000 students who take up the loan each year, with 10,000 students enrolled in postgraduate courses. So we are anticipating that numbers will probably remain the same, although, The basis of the uplift is to enable more students to undertake postgraduate study.
You don't think the decision will have any impact on numbers then?
Well, we would certainly hope that it should do.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to. What analysis has the department done as part of a business case? I assume you went to Treasury and said this is value for money because we're likely to increase student numbers. No?
It's very difficult to actually predict how
of course.
things are going to react.
Yep.
What it does do is reduces the financial barriers for students to apply.
Yep.
There's no cap on the number who can apply, so the Treasury approval is in principle per loan,
yep.
as opposed to a headline amount of funding.
Yep.
So as long as our loans are issued under the terms and conditions, Treasury recognise that those are demand-led, so there's no upper limit to the number who can apply for a loan, as long as they're eligible.
I assume part of the decision, the reason the Minister took the correct decision was that she wanted to not only widen participation, but that would then allow for overall numbers to increase, given that one of the justifications for this was that this is a barrier. This means that our numbers are being artificially suppressed because a lot of young people aren't applying to do this, or people who have other student loans, they haven't applied to do this because the gap in between what the course costs and what they receive is there. So surely the ultimate conclusion that would be that student numbers would grow?
That would be our hope, that they would grow within, especially within the lower income demographic.
Yes. You've done no projections.
We have little control over it, and ultimately postgraduate study the numbers tend to fluctuate with the job market.
Mm-hmm.
So when the job market is buoyant, there's less demand for postgraduate study. And in times where we've seen the job market compressed, people try to differentiate themselves by getting a postgraduate qualification, so you see numbers increasing in those times. When jobs are freely available,
mm-hmm.
there's less reason for a student to feel that they need that additional level of study. So your baseline number is people who are academics who wish to continue for they maybe need it for a teaching qualification or something like that, or they have a genuine interest in the subject area. But in terms of your big changes in numbers, they are driven by the job market.
And do you see now any engagement with the institutions that now the figure is up to 10,000, that they could see this as an opportunity to increase their income, and as such then they'll increase what they charge for postgraduate?
I have not discussed that personally in recent times with the institutions, but there is that element to this. There is the opportunity, because the institutions, again, all the matters we've been discussing previously in terms of sustainability of the institutions, this would at least allow the institutions to uplift the tuition fee charged to postgraduates and therefore improve the margin.
And if they were to move up to £10,000 across the board in their postgraduate fees, what would be the financial impact in terms of income for the institutions?
That would be the number. I don't have that number to hand, but that would be the number of postgraduate students at each.
10,000 enrolled, but 2,000 obviously take the
10,000 across the UK and the south of Ireland, so that's not all within the Northern Ireland institutions.
Okay, so 2,000 within the Northern Ireland institutions?
No, that's across the UK. That's people who are eligible to receive a loan from us, so they could be studying anywhere.
How many then Northern Ireland institutions?
I don't know if we have that figure to hand, Chair.
That is 9,200 students were enrolled in taught courses in the UK.
We'll have to come back with you with those numbers.
In terms of the Northern Ireland students? Okay. I assume that was part of the business case, right?
Well, Johnny can talk about the business case, but the business case was based on...
Sorry, we have it here. Sorry. So, of the 9,200, 7,085 were in NI HEIs.
7,000?
2,115 in GB and 425 in the south.
We haven't done any financial projections on if the institutions were to up that here in Northern Ireland to 10,000, what the impact of that would be in terms of the 7,850 number of their income. No.
That's had outside of the remit of the business case, because the business case for Treasury and as autonomous institutions will be for the universities to decide what fee they charge.
Patrick?
Thank you, and thanks for your answer so far. This is a hugely positive announcement, and it's one that the Minister has obviously driven forward in terms of widening participation and in terms of linking in with other elements and key policies that she has brought forward. So I wonder, just to set the context here, if you could perhaps outline the other areas of ministerial policy which this interfaces with in terms of widening participation, bringing people back into the workforce, upskilling and so on.
In terms of how it interfaces, well, I think, as I said in my opening remarks, in terms of postgraduate tuition fee loan, this was aimed at widening access to students who would have seen the costs of undertaking postgraduate course as a barrier, and so therefore, and then that leads on to higher level qualifications, skills, which then in turn drives the economy in terms of having highly skilled graduates and postgraduate and doing doctorates and the like.
Yeah, they're out there, I think.
Okay, so I should have declared an interest there, Chair, as somebody who was a postgraduate student and also somebody in receipt of a student loan at my undergrad, not my postgraduate. And so just on that basis, I think, Chair, what you've said about the universities potentially increasing their fees isn't something which would be, in anybody's sort of purview. It wouldn't be something that we would encourage. And I suppose what I would like to see is that this is actually an enabler for universities to be supported in terms of more students coming through, preventing barriers for students. I'm also conscious that a lot of students don't take up that offer of the loan, or perhaps are ineligible for that offer of a loan. So if universities were to increase that, there would actually be a huge knock-on impact, which could decrease numbers by discouraging other students from doing so. And on that basis, from the department point of view, I'd be keen to get a sense of I know NUS and others have welcomed this, so I'd be very keen to hear about your ongoing engagement with both themselves and with the institutions as well.
Graham, before you answer that, and apologies, Padraig, it's just one of our committee members in the room has to leave at 1, which would mean we'd fall below quorum, which means we could make a decision in relation to the SL1s that the Minister needs agreed today. So I'm just going to, if you don't mind, Graham and colleagues, suspend for this session for a few minutes just so we can agree the SL1, and then I'll come straight back to Padraig on that question. Is that okay? Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Padraig, apologies. I just want to make sure we get this law changed. Okay, colleagues, I just refer you to page 65 of table items. The committee recently approved the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Miscarriage Regulations 2026, subject to the ESR report. The report has recently been published and included in table items. The ESR had no comment to make on this rule. The department has just advised that perhaps 2 further technical rules must be laid as soon as possible in order to ensure that the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Miscarriages Regulation in Northern Ireland are brought into effect as planned on the 6th of April. This rule appears to be subject to confirmatory resolution, meaning that they will come into effect as soon as they are laid, but are subject to a subsequent confirmation resolution at plenary. Colleagues, we don't need to introduce our guests as they're well known to the committee for their work, so I'll just hand over to you at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll briefly set out the purpose and effect of the 2 sets of statutory parental bereavement pay regulations that are before the committee today. I'm afraid I have to start with an apology in terms of the amount of time the committee has had to consider these draft regulations before they come into effect. We briefed the committee on the 28th of January about the changes to parental bereavement leave and pay, which are due to come into effect from the 6th of April, and the miscarriage regulations will be debated under the affirmative draft affirmative procedure on the floor of the House next week. I mentioned then that we would be bringing forward an additional set of regulations so that the day one right to parental bereavement leave and pay would also become operational. That has turned into 2 sets of regulations, and one of those needs to come into effect before the miscarriage regulations. So that was why we were keen to get the correspondence to the committee before the meeting today. These regulations have required additional legal scrutiny because they're unique to Northern Ireland and to the specific entitlement to parental bereavement leave and pay. It's the first time that a family-related paid leave entitlement has been made a day one right, either here or in Britain. So we've had to have this additional legal scrutiny. That's helped to confirm and refine how the payment will operate for employees who work irregular or variable hours, those in less secure forms of work, those moving employers, and for example employees who are returning from sort of voluntary service or armed forces, reserve duty, other circumstances like that. The scrutiny has also provided additional assurance that the entitlement will operate fairly and as intended across a whole range of employment circumstances. In terms of the detail of the regulations, the first set, the Statutory Parental Bereavement Pay General Amendment Regulations 2026, are a technical but essential part of securing the reforms. Their only purpose is to remove Regulation 37 from the Statutory Parental Bereavement Pay General Number 2 Regulations 2023, and that is an expiry provision. That expiry provision was originally included to make clear that the initial arrangements brought in under the 2022 Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Act were time limited. They were interim arrangements which allowed parental bereavement leave and pay to operate here in the same way as it has done in Britain, but that having an expiry clause made clear that they were interim rules, they weren't intended to be permanent. We're now at the point where the scheme that was intended by the committee in 2022 is being put in place, and so the expiry provision needs to be removed so that parental bereavement pay will continue to be available to all who will now be entitled to it. The second set of regulations is the one that really does the detailed work of making parental bereavement pay a day one right. The core aim is to ensure that statutory parental bereavement pay is accessible and fair to all parents who require it. So first, the regulations remove service-based barriers to entitlement by removing the requirement for 26 weeks of continuous employment. As a result, employees will no longer be excluded simply because they're new to a job or have recently changed employer. Parental bereavement is painful and unpredictable, and removing the service requirement ensures that parental bereavement pay operates as a genuine day one right. Secondly, the regulations address the position of employees with limited, atypical or irregular earnings histories. They introduce an 8-week earnings test, and crucially they allow entitlement to be determined by reference to expected normal weekly earnings, and hence the associated national insurance contributions where necessary. That ensures that employees are not excluded simply because they lack a full earnings record, have recently returned from absence, or work variable or irregular hours. Thirdly, the regulations make associated amendments to ensure coherence across the statutory scheme in terms of how earnings calculations should be carried out. And finally, the regulations make technical amendments relating to employees who have worked or were expected to work in an EEA state during the relevant earnings assessment period, to ensure that such employees who've worked in the European Economic Area are treated as employed in Northern Ireland for social security purposes. So taken together, these regulations will ensure that entitlement to statutory parental bereavement pay is not determined by length of service, technical earnings gaps, or the structure of an individual's employment history. They support a scheme that is accessible, equitable and responsive to real-world working patterns. So just to emphasise at the end that both these sets of regulations are necessary to ensure continuity of the statutory parental bereavement pay scheme, to introduce entitlement in cases of miscarriage, and to give effect to a new technical approach to statutory payments to make them a day one right. Again, I'm grateful for the committee's understanding on the manner and timing in which we're bringing these additional regulations to you, and we're happy to address any questions.
Colin, Geraldine and Joseph, thank you very much for that. And can I thank my committee colleagues for agreeing to edit the agenda today to make sure that we could get this important matter through. I don't have any questions from colleagues. So are members content that I put to the committee that the committee is content for the department to make the statutory parental bereavement pay general amendment regulation Northern Ireland 2026? Is that agreed? Agreed. And is the committee content for the department to make the statutory parental bereavement pay employment and earnings amendment regulation Northern Ireland 2026? Is that agreed, colleagues? Agreed. Thank you all very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Okay, we'll skip back then, members, to item 9. Sorry, number 8.
She says no. The officials back again. Sorry about this, members. She says no. No. It's fine. I'll start now.
Apologies about that, Patrick.
Let's start.
Okay. I'll wait till
the officials have to come back. We're nearly there.
Apologies for that, colleagues, and much appreciated. So, Mr. Delargy had just raised an issue there. You got a copy of that in relation to NUS, USI, etc. Or do you want him to repeat the question?
So I can repeat the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. So it's to see what engagement you've had with NUS. Obviously, they've welcomed this, but also to understand what engagement you've had with institutions around this.
Well, in terms of engagement with NUS, USI, I can come back to the precise date, but I spoke to Ben Friel within the last couple of weeks. We had a meeting with Ben within the last couple of weeks. It is another stakeholder in the sector that we engage with on an ongoing basis. And as you pointed out, Mr. Largy, NUS USI has welcomed this announcement. In terms of the institutions, again, we engage with those on an ongoing basis. I think we had our quarterly meeting with Queen's within the last couple of weeks. We're due to have our quarterly meeting, and this is just this postgraduate tuition fee loan uplift is and the Minister's decision is just one of a series of matters that we discuss. In terms of the linkages, I think you'd also asked about the linkages. Obviously, in terms of this decision by the Minister, links very clearly to the Minister's economic vision in terms of good jobs, promoting regional balance and raising productivity. You know, individuals who go through postgraduate are likely to access higher paid jobs. In terms of promoting regional balance, it will increase the supply of skilled graduates across the region. And in terms of raising productivity, again, it encourages investment in the region. There's also the research element of this, which can attract foreign direct investment.
Yeah, okay. So thanks for that. And I suppose when I did my PGC, I was in the fortunate position that, like a few of my counterparts, I came straight from school, university, and straight into the PGC. And I'm conscious that a lot of my colleagues doing the course left employment to take on the course, and that therefore they left it at more significant economic risk to do so. So one of the things that I'm very conscious of is that there's a marketing piece around this about how we get the information out to encourage people to apply, to make it be, I suppose, very apparent and well known that this offer is now there. So can I ask what you're doing with employers? Can I ask what you're doing to encourage people to consider postgraduate studies, because we know that there are so many barriers, whether those be time, financial, other commitments around childcare, caring responsibilities, and so on. So I want to know what you're doing to ensure that this information is readily available and that people are encouraged to utilise it.
So in terms of in terms of me or the officials I'm sitting with, we have not engaged with employers directly. That is not to say that other officials within Skills and Education Group will. We own the linkage with the many stakeholders in the higher education sector in terms of universities. That is where we will encourage the universities for themselves with the linkages to employers. That is not to say that there won't be a lot of other communication going on with other colleagues in Skills and Education Group and across the department with employers on this. We can come back to you on that, but certainly with my engagement with the universities and Ben Friel in NUS USI, we would see those stakeholders playing a massive role in the marketing piece.
Yes, so I think that would be useful if you could do so, because I would be very keen to see this is an excellent policy. It's one which will really transform education and encourage lifelong learning for so many people across society. So I want to make sure that everybody knows about it and that everybody knows that they have the opportunity to access it. So I would be grateful if you could do that and to update us on exactly how that's being rolled out in terms of marketing and visibility. Thanks.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have no further questions from this, so can I thank you very much for your representations here today. Much appreciated.
In sum.
Yeah, Peter, do you want to summarise the two actions then?
Yeah, so members, in respect to the previous briefing, we're content to write to the department seeking sight of the redacted information and also just seeking the timeline for the multi-campus model review and sight of that report when available, if that's agreed.
Agreed.
And the other one is if we can write to the department just about the number of Northern Ireland students on postgrads who are getting the loans. They give us some other figures. And also about the marketing of the new PGTFL loans to employers, etc.
Members content? Okay, we'll move quickly then to correspondence. Members,
to just say dispose as per.
Members happy that we dispose of those as suggested in the index. They're all for noting except one which is just for forwarding on. Members content? Forward work programme, Peter.
Very briefly, members, then I'm expecting the department to come and brief us on the 25th of March on the fracking bill, so the onshore petroleum licensing bill, because I'm expecting the second stage to be just after Easter. Also, I'm hoping to get the department to come along and brief us on the utility regulator bill, because I'm thinking the second stage will be also just after Easter, I hope. Additionally, assembly engagement will come along on the 29th of April, just to give the committee some pointers, ideas on how to promote engagement with these committee stages, which we're about to start. And as members are aware, we're going to get Community Energy and also the Department and Great British Energy to come along on the 15th of April to talk about community renewable energy schemes. So members content with the forward work programme as drafted, Chairperson?
Members agreed? No problem. Is there any other business members wish to raise at this stage? If not, the committee will now adjourn and we'll be back on Wednesday the 25th at 10 a.m. in room 30. Colleagues and members, thank you very much for your attendance today.